think the say-do gap is real, especially in snacking. We hear consumers talk a lot about, well-being and being more mindful. Also, like sustainability. No one's going to say that's not important, but when they're at that moment of purchase, you do see a gap sometimes in their actions. In terms of some of those other priorities they talk about, it's a nice to have, but if it impacts price, then it becomes less of a priority in that decision hierarchy for them as well. So those are kind of human truths, no matter where we study.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dig In podcast. I am really excited to be joined today by Cristina Marinucci. She's VP Global Growth and Omni Commercial Insights, which is quite a mouthful, which means it's a big job, and also the founder and co-host of the She Commerce podcast, which we're also going to talk a lot about. So, Cristina, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jess. I'm excited to chat with you.
Okay, I'm going to throw an impromptu question out there for you. What's the most ridiculous thing you've bought online?
Recently, I buy ridiculous things online all the time. Full disclosure, I'm a sucker for social commerce. So it was actually a revolving concealer brush. I was scrolling, saw it. They had me at flawless, finish in 5 seconds. And before my brain can intervene, I hit that buy now button and it's on its way to me as we speak.
Wow. Okay. Well, you'll have to report back, give us a product assessment there.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background and your role today.
All right. I've spent my career in FMCG and in different roles, right? I talk about the intersection of like insight, innovation, and commerce across different parts of CPG, different parts of the world. But today I'm Global VP of Growth and Omni Commercial Insights at Mondelez, as you know. And my team is sitting really at the helm of shopper and consumer insights, retail media, and digital commerce. And we're really focused against one core mission, which is putting data and human understanding into actionable insights and growth decisions that are actually going to show up at shelf and online, right? Not just in theory. Over the years, I've worked in various markets, categories, and done things from classic brand building and shopper consumer research to advanced analytics, retail media, and omni-channel strategy. But I think the common thread is I gravitate towards the messy, right? The transformational problems where there's an opportunity to build something new capabilities, new frameworks, new ways of working, new ways of thinking that are going to really transform the organization.
Let me just ask a question about that. Have you always sought out those messy, complex, thorny, hairy things, or is that something that you kind of arrived at later in your career?
As I reflect back, I don't think I initially sought them out. I think, organically they came and I thrived within them and really found that sweet spot between, having to create something new, but really leverage the data and the insights and kind of dig into what has happened and what has worked before and then what's possible. So I think once I experienced it, then yes, I did start seeking out. So like the mid, career on for sure.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, speaking of digging in, let's do that. So we're going to move to a really rich story that I think personifies a lot of the experiences that you've described so far, Cristina. So our listeners crave inspiration from other leaders, and one of the best ways to inspire is to tell a story. And you've been a really influential leader in shaping how Mondelez approaches their global innovation strategy. So I'd love to dig into that. First, can you just talk to me about sort of the context of how Mondelez thinks about local versus global innovation and sort of set the stage for us for how that's thought about today?
Sure. In snacking, I think local context, especially for this category, matters a lot, right? Like taste, those rituals, pack sizes, price points, all that are going to be very locally influenced. At the same time, I think you can still build a scalable pipeline, even if every market is not reinventing the wheel. And that's how we think about like freedom within a framework. Actually, at Mondelez, we say local first, but not local only. So global is defining those big bets and platforms, right? The demand science that we have that's fueling this, really helping to uncover those consumer tensions and the different brand territories we believe we can win over time. And then local is going to take that and translate it into what are those relevant products, the formats, the activations, the price points, the packages that make the most sense for their shoppers, channels, and that local reality. So my job has been to help create that shared language and unified framework and build the toolkit so that, Brazil, India, the UK, the US we aren't having 10 different conversations about innovation and what's driving growth in snacking. We're all kind of looking at the same consumer truths and portfolio logic. And then we're letting the markets kind of flex within that space.
So, how did you go about developing that framework? Like, who are the people that were tackling this problem, and what were some of the ways you approached it?
Yeah, it was a big undertaking. We've moved from, the mindset of let's launch a new flavor to a system view of innovation. And we've leaned into, that core, which is the demand science, right? That consumer understanding of the when, the why, with whom people are snacking
Mhm.
and what problem they're solving in that moment. So the innovation briefs now start from that lens, not from a technology or a factory line or, we're filling a gap, so we're doing this, but really trying to push to that consumer problem to solve. And then we've also shifted to work more on big bet platforms instead of isolated launches. So we're investing behind more scalable platforms that can travel across brands, across markets, across multiple years, and not just be limited to these one off SKUs that kind of fade out in year two. We're trying to build these continuous consumer learning loops, right? Using a mix of different things, behavioral data, agile concept testing, in market experiments, so that we're not waiting 18 plus months to learn, whether or not something may work. So I think that shift is really going from a more fragmented kind of project by project ad hoc innovation system to a portfolio and a platform mindset that's going to be anchored in those key consumer moments and the commercial kind of viability of those.
Yeah. I love so much of what you just said because it really is a smart way to approach innovation. And I think there are still a lot of companies, especially in CPG, that just haven't quite cracked that code. They still operate very project by project. Sometimes
Mm.
we even just have to really remind them that, hey, are we looking at incrementality here? Like that should be one of
Yeah.
our KPIs, right? So it's just really it's inspiring to hear it being done well. And I'd love for you to just spend a moment about some of those consumer moments and those like, real underlying needs and how you think about that global versus local. Cause you made a good point. There's just some things that have to be learned and understood at the local level, but there's also probably some human truths when it comes to things like snacking, right? So I don't know, what are some of those like those consumer moments that you could share that sort of personify what you've learned?
Yeah. I think the say do gap is real, especially
Mhm.
in snacking. We hear consumers talk a lot about, well being and being more mindful, also like sustainability. No one's going to say that's not important, but when they're at that moment of purchase, we do see a gap sometimes in their actions where, especially in the well being, I think everyone starts out the week, the day with the best intentions to be healthy. And then it kind of wanes throughout the day. And by after lunch and certainly after dinner, they are way more flexible or open in their choices and maybe
Mhm.
less rigid. And certainly as the week goes on too, as you're approaching the weekend, a lot of that willpower will decline. And in terms of some of those other priorities they talk about, it's a nice to have, but if it impacts the price, then
Yeah.
it maybe becomes less of a priority in that decision hierarchy for them as well. So those
Yeah.
are kind of human truths, no matter where we study
Yeah.
consumers and shopper behavior in any market.
Yeah, it's so true. At Dig, we say we have this belief that attitudes don't predict decisions. Like they're important to understand, but really it comes down to consumer choice and influencing those
Yeah.
choices. Okay, so the global innovation strategy, it can't be an easy thing to pull off. You're making it sound like it's kind of flawlessly happening, but I'm sure
Not
that
at
there are
all.
bumps in the road, right? Yeah. So, and this says something about my personality, but I love to hear like where you get tripped.
the
So
juicy
share some
stuff.
of the yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's tension that is baked into the model, and there are definitely real challenges to making that work. I think, my market is different fatigue. Every market is different. We know that. But if
Right.
everyone is the exception, we will lose all scale.
Sure.
So we need to get teams to genuinely use those shared frameworks rather than decorate PowerPoints or just populate templates. That's hard work. Like they need to buy into this belief and it be ingrained in their how. I think there's this tension between speed and alignment, right? Global guardrails are great until you're trying to hit an in-market key customer deadline and it feels a lot slower to bring everyone along.
Yeah.
So that balance of governance with agility is a constant calibration.
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies struggle with data overload. We have more data than we know what to do with. And I would say not all data is decision grade, right? So the challenge is really focusing on the right data and a few signals that matter, not drowning teams in dashboards and reporting and analysis paralysis, as we say.
Right.
So, and then I think the probably one of the biggest challenges, and we continue to struggle with this, is culturally killing ideas early is
Yeah.
tough. And it's tough for everyone. I think everyone loves to launch and everyone loves generating ideas. Fewer people like to say, hey, this doesn't meet the bar. Like, let's redirect those resources. And that ruthless prioritization will result ultimately in us being able to focus on, the bigger bets and repurposing those resources and that energy to the right places. So none of this is fully solved, Jess. It is something we actively manage every day.
I love the term ruthless prioritization, and it is so important. And we found, again, the companies that are getting the competitive advantage in market have learned how to do
Mm,
that well. They've learned how to
sure.
kill the bad ideas early and really invest in the ones that are going to work. So I love that learning. How do you measure success for this type of program? Like, what are some of the KPIs that you pay attention to?
Yeah, some of them are the typical like business outcomes, obviously, contribution of innovation to incremental revenue and profit. We're looking at both brand incrementality and focusing more so now on category incrementality. We need to be growing the categories that we play in, repeat rates, and whether we're adding new buyers and or new occasions or just rather than just shifting share within the portfolio or the category. Overall portfolio health is important. So we need that mix of big bets versus line extensions. What is the strength of those platforms across markets? And ultimately, that survival rate of innovations over time. Like we said, we don't want it to just burn out and, after the first year. And then I think with this new model, some new areas that we're starting to look at are speed and learning, right? That time from insights to activation or insights to shelf, how quickly we're able to kind of generate those ideas, test, learn, and scale or stop, right? And
Yeah.
then the ways of working, our markets actually adopting these shared
Right.
frameworks. We talked about that earlier and tools. Are we seeing like that cross market reuse of platforms instead of everyone starting from scratch? So for me, that real win is when I see a market that we maybe weren't directly working with, pick up one of those frameworks or platform and apply it on their own. That's
Yeah.
when you kind of know, okay, it's embedded. It's not just a PowerPoint or, a training or that transition from push from the center to pull from the markets is the real unlock.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Absolutely. And one of the other phrases you used when you talked about some of the success metrics is survival rate of new products because so
Right.
many of them don't last. And that is such a CPG like challenge. And I wonder, maybe you and I can take this on in the industry, but rather than thinking about it as survival rate, what about it's a thrive rate? It's like, how can we get
Ooh,
more products to have that
I love
sustaining
that.
term? Okay. So we're going to get through
Yeah,
not
you don't
just,
wanna just survive. That's a really good point, right? You do wanna year 2, you should be building on the momentum from year 1, and what's next, and I think once you shift from that idea of like a one-off to a true platform, like an innovation platform that has multiple legs that can continue to reinvent itself and show up, in different ways to serve those needs. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly thriving.
yeah, love that. So what's been your biggest takeaway from this experience of building and, executing this global strategy?
Yeah, innovation, I think, is less about ideas and just generating good ideas and more about the system design and the behavior change. I think ideas, we're never short on ideas, right? That was never the constraint. It was more about, do we agree on what problem we're solving?
Mhm.
What is that consumer problem solve? How we unlocked a real human truth, a deep insight that's going to help solve for that? And do we have clear, in our case, shared ways of working to make decisions, but also who ultimately owns that decision? Because if we're waiting for 100% agreement, we're not going to move forward on anything. And
Yeah.
then are we brave enough to say no to good ideas so that we can really double down on the great ones? Because yes, that's
Yeah.
where we need to kind of pull those out from the average. And I think when you get that language, the incentives, the rituals right, and how you prioritize, how you review the pipeline, how you celebrate the wins, how you kill the projects when you need to, and make those tough choices, you unlock a very different level of innovation. And it's been a real learning journey for me, and definitely a messy one.
Yeah.
I'll say lots
You
of
like the mess, right? That's what you
yeah,
said.
I do. Yeah, exactly. But it's certainly a team sport. So I think you can't go at it alone.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective and that story. Let's move to your side hustle, which is pretty cool. So, you just launched the She Commerce podcast. I've listened to both episodes. I'm super excited to see what's coming next. First, give us the pitch. What's the podcast all about?
Yeah, She Commerce is a podcast and a community that is built to empower women and women advocates in CPG and commerce. I
Mhm.
co host it with my fabulous host, Jackie Danowski. And the vibe is pretty simple. It's power women plus real talk. So we try to go beyond the buzzwords,
Mhm.
and everything is in bounds, everything from retail media and omni commerce strategy to, very real stuff like the work life imbalance, the stereotypes, the closing of wage gaps. So every episode is designed to leave our viewers, listeners with something that's actionable and they can kind of use on that Monday morning, but
Mhm.
also reminding you that you're not doing this alone. So we're all about bold brands, fierce women, one sisterhood.
Yeah, I love it. I love that tagline too. You mentioned some of these grittier topics, but what are some of the things that you anticipate you'll be able to dig into?
Yeah, we're not as interested in those polished highlight reels, but we want to get into the real stuff. And so topics we've discussed and have some plans for are definitely, around money and power, pay gaps, how to negotiate, equity, building wealth, not just titles, being the only in the room, whatever that may look like, how that shows up in decision making, in your confidence, and avoiding the burnout there as well. Different career pivots. We've already gotten into some of that, right? Failures, learnings, right? Getting restructured, leaving toxic cultures, realizing you might be in the wrong role and making a bet on yourself. And then certainly this balance or imbalance, like careers and caregiving, like what it actually looks like to lead teams, raise kids, or care for a family, staying ambitious without burning out. So less about those glossy empowerment slogans, more about the unfiltered realities of leadership and hopefully strategies that actually hold up in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. Well, all those topics sound absolutely fascinating and important, I should say. One that I hope also comes up is related to as female leaders. I think because we are caregivers in our personal lives, we carry through so much of that caregiving to our professional world. And
Mhm.
so I know I feel like I take on a lot of the like emotional burden of my team and like trying to find ways to do that healthily. And as I've grown, to more seniority, how I actually have to delegate even that emotional responsibility, right? That you can't sort of take it all on. So I wonder if that'll come up with any of your guests.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
We will definitely touch on that in future episodes.
Yeah. What do you hope your listeners take away?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just actionable takeaways they can use immediately in their day to day, right? In retail, e commerce, omnichannel. I think clearer thinking in this fast changing retail landscape, right? Between retail media, growth, changing shopper behavior, what matters, and what to do. Certainly stronger relationships without the burnout. So just as you were
Oh,
speaking to, like what is that advocacy we can build, confidence they build within themselves, within others, and navigating those harder moments. And then a real community, right? We want to build connections, mentors, a sisterhood. We talk about that, that you can actually lean on. And I think we're doing that with the honest conversations and hopefully with inspiration from women who are building bold brands and leading with purpose. And probably the last big thing is permission to think bigger, right? Whether that's taking a risk, advocating for themselves, redefining what success could and should look like at them for this stage of their life. I think if someone is listening and feels, both seen and more equipped, we've done our job. And if you've listened, at the end, we ask our guests to kind of take a pledge and build our growing network of female leaders and advocates and pay it forward to amplify women's voices. So that's really what it's all about.
I love it. I mean, there's so many inspiring things about that. And I consider myself part of the sisterhood. So thank you
You
for
are.
letting me.
Absolutely.
Any lessons from first time launching a podcast?
Oh gosh, yes. Progress over perfection, right? If we'd waited until every element was flawless, we'd still be in planning mode, right? The fastest way to learn is just to jump in and start doing it. Like be live, go live. I think having a sharp point of view is important. Two people that are just talking about marketing is not really a show. It's not entertainment, doesn't have an angle. You need to have that clear lens, like who you're here for, what you'll talk about, and what you won't. Also, I think you need to treat this like a product, not a hobby. If
Mhm.
you're going to take it seriously, you have to think about, content, distribution, the community, the partnerships, just like you would as if you're a brand. So kind of having that experience is certainly helpful bringing it here. The audio and the operations matter, right? The prep, the scheduling, the editing, the social cut downs. It's a real engine behind each episode that you need to manage and plan for. And then I think lastly, you need to have fun, right? It's
Yeah.
extra. It's something extra in your life. So if you don't find it fun, if you don't see it as some type of outlet or creative expression, and if you're doing it with someone else, you certainly need to have a partner that you truly enjoy and
Mhm.
believe complements what you bring to the podcast, right? You don't want a duplicate and clone of yourself. You really, I think bringing together that dynamic and that energy is what really creates the magic, especially for Jackie and I.
Yeah, definitely. Well, your chemistry is very clear. Great partnership. Okay, we're going to move to the final dig. This is all about you as an individual. So feel free to take off the professional hat and just be your almost consumer side of your world here. What's the last product or service you bought on impulse? And you can't use the foundation wand, it has to be something else.
I buy on social media a lot, so it's definitely there. I just bought something. It was like a gem, kind of a bedazzler, if you will, for your hair, and I bought it for my girls. And literally, it just like punches into your hair all these little gems. It's so cute and so
Oh,
fast. I saw it again, social
yeah.
media scrolling, and it looked like a great little gift for them.
That's awesome. Oh, that's very cool. What's a product or a category or brand that you could justify any price point for? You just have to have it in your life.
I think it's more experiences, like those travel
Mm.
experiences or other type of events we go to. I can talk myself into almost any price point on that if it means, time away together, fewer distractions, new place to explore, memories to be made. I think that's my ultimate soft spot.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you have a trip coming up that you're planning?
I do. We're going away on a cruise after Christmas over the New Year's to Caribbean, Mexico, and Honduras, actually.
Ooh, wow. Something to look forward to. That's
Yeah.
awesome. We all know brands have distinct personalities. What's a brand that you would date and a brand that you would marry? And it's up to you. They can be different brands.
That's a good question. I'm like, do I ask this to the younger Christina or the older ones? Or, no, I'm just kidding. I'd probably date the early days Apple. Like Apple was,
Mm,
I think back in the day, more rebellious, right? Think
yeah.
different version that was breaking the rules and didn't care who it made uncomfortable. That's the younger me. But today I'd marry actually the Apple of today. I think it's still very like design obsessed, innovative, incredibly consistent, very integrated into your daily life, committed to the long game, right? So I think it's that younger kind of boldness, rebellious has now matured and become much more future oriented,
Right.
dependable, and really build a whole ecosystem around it, which would be something attractive and good in a partner for the long term.
That's so interesting to think about a brand as it was, say, 20 years ago, and that you would be interested in dating it, and then marrying it today. That actually is like the definition of the best partner, right? That's
Yeah,
like really
exactly.
interesting. I thought about that. Very cool. Who's an industry leader that you think we should bring on the podcast?
Ooh, I'd love to hear from like Indra Nooyi and perspective on the kind of the long-term strategy, performance with purpose, and leading through really massive changes like we are now in global CPG.
Yeah.
I definitely want to hear more the unfiltered version now that she's not at the helm of the business anymore. Like, what would she do differently if she were starting out in today's like more data driven, complex digital world? And, certainly with AI changing the game as we speak, I think that'd be really cool to hear from her.
Oh, man. That's crazy to think if I could ever actually interview her, I would be so nervous. It would be
Same.
yeah, but it'd be worth it. So, finally, what keeps you inspired in your work, in your day-to-day?
Well, at work, it certainly make like that impact, right? And, the idea that the better insight or smarter decision can literally change how millions of people experience a brand and in their lives. So I don't think for me that gets old. It's, uncovering that insight, but really seeing it play out and the actionable like impact that has on people's lives. I think in both professional and personal, it's also about the people, right? The people I'm building with and for my team, my peers, and obviously my daughters. And I care a lot about the human side and kind of the how of leadership and the culture and the opportunities that I'm cultivating and hopefully that I'd be proud for them to step into one day as well. So
Yeah.
I think just that work connecting to real people and real progress is when it does that, it's easy to stay inspired.
Yeah. Well said. And this has been such an inspiring conversation. So, Christina, thank you for joining me on the podcast and to putting another plug in for the She Commerce podcast that Christina co-hosts. It's really worth a listen. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for bringing that thought leadership to the industry. So,
Thank you for
well
having
done.
me. I
Right.
appreciate it. Thank you for the support.
Like what you heard? Share the inspiration or head to diginsights.com to learn more about what we do.